Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, and a shout out to our online community. So glad you're all with us today. I have been waiting for June since January. So we've been waiting for June to arrive this year because when the monks were postponed from January to June, it was like, oh, don't make me practice patience. Anything but that. So we've been practicing patience, and I thank you all for your patience and your participation this month as well. We have a great month ahead of us. We are calling this month around here Buddha Month, not only because we are going to celebrate Buddha's birthday with the Kwanam Monastery this afternoon, but because we are anxiously awaiting the Tibetan monks from the Drang Gomang Monastery who will be with us for a full week starting Tuesday, June 19th. And so in honor of their visit, there are Buddha statues in the building, and we have a number of additional activities focused on Buddhism this month only. So you'll be hearing a lot about Buddhism. And you're like, I thought they were New Thought Christian. Why are they talking about Buddhism so much? Well, because the monks are coming. And in order for us to receive the greatest blessing that we can by their presence here in our spiritual community, it would be helpful to know a little bit about them and their beliefs and practices, so that when they are here and sharing their spiritual wisdom and cultural phenomenon, their events, and when you are in their presence to experience the level of compassion that happens to exude from them, then you'll know, I'm so glad I can soak this up a little bit more. So please participate in the extracurricular activities that we have going on throughout the month. To get us started during our Sunday series, we are jumping into a 2-week series on Jesus and Buddha, the Parallel Sayings. And this book is by Christian scholar Marcus Berg and Buddhist monk and practitioner Jack Kornfield. So in our New Thought philosophy, we recognize universal truths in all the world religions. Each of them offer truth to guide us in our life. When we are comparing the teachings of both Jesus and Buddha, we see that each teacher in their own way offers the same advice. They share for us to live with love. They share that we could live a full and very simple life. And they focus on fully experiencing the sacred. One came from the west, one came from the east. However, 500 years apart, their teachings are dramatically similar in a lot of ways. Their followers created 2 very distinctly different religions, and yet when we listen deeply to their words, it is as if they speak from the same heart. In Unity, we know that heart to be the heart of God. Jack Kornfield, the Buddhist monk and teacher, said that this is universal wisdom and there can be no doubt. Jesus and Buddha both taught the laws of the heart, the eternal fragrance of virtue, the path of generosity, the power of faith, contentment, and compassion. They both inspired their disciples to turn away from what we call materialism of the outer world and to open their hearts to compassion, to live from spirit and to come to know the timeless truths of the universe, and to awaken the undying essence within that is all life. Does that sound vaguely familiar to you? We've been talking about those exact things. He goes on to say that what matters is not the scholarly or theological differences between Buddhism and Christianity, but that they both offer us direct teachings and instruction, practices and ways of being, ways of seeing the world, how to conduct our life, and to free our heart from prison. Jesus and Buddha both said to society, "Come and follow me." But do we dare to do that? I can only answer that question for myself, and so I invite you to answer that question for yourself. Do you dare to follow in the footsteps of not only Jesus, but the Buddha as well? This is not a trick question, and you don't have to answer aloud. Christian scholar Marcus Borg outlined 4 key elements of our comparison study. First, the parallels involve particular teachings as to loving your enemies, and also the principles of compassion. Second, Jesus and Buddha both had transforming life experiences around the age of 30. After a 6-year religious quest, Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, had his enlightenment experience under the Bo tree. Jesus' religious quest led him into the wilderness and then to his spiritual mentor, John the Baptist, where he had a vision following his baptism. Both Jesus and Buddha began their public ministry and teaching shortly after their spiritual experience. Third, both began their renewal movements within their inherited religious tradition. Buddha, Siddhartha, was raised a Hindu. Jesus was raised a Jew. So in Hinduism and Judaism, they both took what they were trained and wanted it to expand to the next level. Neither one of them thought that they were founding a new religion. They were just living the one they were raised in an empowered and sacred way. To them, it was no different. And fourth, there are parallels in the religious traditions of the story, you know, those stories I love, the stories that grew up out of their experience, the ones the people told for centuries. Both were perceived as more than human. They were given a divine status, where in their day, that was not a regular idea to the people. And both of them rejected that idea that they were any different from anyone else that they were in community with. They did not recognize themselves with any exalted language or status. None. So Jesus and Buddha were teachers of wisdom, Wisdom is more than ethics, even though it includes ethical teaching. The more part consists of the fundamental ways that we see and be in the world. Wisdom is not just about moral behavior. It is from that internal place from which that moral behavior comes, from which it flows out in your words, in your actions, in your behaviors, in your interactions with others, those whom you like and those whom you judge. The other beautiful thing about Jesus and Buddha both is that they were teachers not only of the cultural wisdom, but a subvertive wisdom. They undermined and challenged the conventional ways of which their faith and philosophy was taught and practiced in their day. I love that. Their subversive behavior and wisdom was known as alternative. Anything that goes beyond into the deeper level. In Christianity, it would be Gnosticism, mysticism. Anything that goes beyond is considered alternative. And yet when you get down to the essence of each of these philosophies, it's really its core truth. It's harder to practice at that level, and so most people don't. But that was the inspiring thing about Jesus and Buddha, because they saw that was the way. That was the path. Jesus called it the way. Buddha called it the path. They were just living their spiritual philosophy at such a depth. People saw them as different. So in the topic of compassion, Jesus' words from Sermon on the Mount represent his most important teachings, just as the sayings of the Buddha, called the Dhammapada, which is the central book in Buddhism, closely parallels the teachings of Sermon on the Mount. In John chapter 15, verses 12 and 13, Jesus says, "This is my commandment, that you have loved one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends."
In the Sutta Nipata, verse 149 to 150, Buddha says, "Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so, cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Let your thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world."
In Mark chapter 10, verse 19, Jesus says, "You know the commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not defraud, and honor your father and mother."
From the Kudakapatha, verse 2, the Buddha says, "Abstain from killing and from taking what is not given. Abstain from unchastity and from speaking falsely. Do not accept gold and silver."
Compassion in action.
Good boy. Yeah, good fish. Yeah. Good fish.
On the topic of wisdom, Jesus and Buddha both taught how they each invoked the golden rule for treating others as you would want them to treat you. Jesus' idea of turning the other cheek and loving your enemies are mirrored in the words of the Buddha. Both Jesus and Buddha focused on the individual rather than criticizing others.
From the Dhammapada, chapter 10, verse 1, Buddha says, Consider others as yourself.
And in Luke chapter 6, verse 31, Jesus said, "Do to others as you would have them do to you."
From the Sutta Nipata, verses 149 to 150, Buddha states, "Let your thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world."
And in John chapter 15, verse 12, Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you."
From the Dhammapada, once again, the Buddha says, "Overcome anger by love, overcome evil by good, overcome the miser by giving, overcome the liar by truth."
And in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 through 30, it was Jesus who said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you." Jesus was born into a peasant family in Galilee. However, Buddha was born a prince, the son of a powerful ruler in northern India. One attracted a ragtag collection of fishermen, farmers, and Gentiles, and the other had wealthy Brahmins, common folk, and outcasts. Although they had very different upbringings, each arrived at the moral distinction. Both came to the same conclusion that hoarding wealth was not the way to heaven and enlightenment, but that worldly riches interfere with our attempt to lead a good life. Buddha spoke in terms of detaching ourselves in order to reach nirvana, and Jesus spoke of personal enrichment and was found in the consciousness of heaven rather than the marketplace. In Luke chapter 6, verse 20, Jesus said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God."
And in the Dhammapada, chapter 15, verse 4, Buddha says, "Let us live most happily, possessing nothing. Let us feed on joy like the radiant gods."
In Luke chapter 21, verse 4, Jesus said, "He looked up and saw a rich people putting their gifts into the treasury. He also saw a poor widow who put in 2 small copper coins. He said to the people around him, 'Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on.'"
And from the Jatakamala, chapter 3, verse 23, Buddha states, "Giving is the noble expression, the benevolence of the mighty. Even dust, given in childish innocence, is a good gift. No gift that is given in good faith to a worthy recipient can be called small. Its effect is so great."
And in Matthew chapter 19, verse 21, Jesus said, "If you wish to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven."
And from the Dhammapada, chapter 13, verse 11, Buddha says, "The greedy do not go to heaven. The foolish do not extol charity. The wise one, however, rejoicing in charity, becomes thereby happy in the beyond."
And here we leave our comparisons for today. Seeing these universal and timeless truths shared by these 2 men who inspired their disciples to turn away from materialism of the world, to open their hearts to compassion, to live a life of spirit, to come to know these timeless truths and own them for themselves, is to awaken to the undying essence of all life, which is what we continue to do in our own spiritual path today. Aristotle wrote, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." Both Jesus and Buddha strived to educate the heart. Our explorations will take a pause during the month of June and resume on Mondays in July. So go and awaken to the presence of truth in all your activities and multiple pathways to the indwelling divine. Namaste.